We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Weed Talk Now. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
And we are very happy to be joined by Bruce Barcott, who is the editor of Leafly.com. He's also the author of a very popular book called Weed the People. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us tonight out in the great northwest of Washington State. How is it out there?
It is fantastic. Thanks for having me, guys. Welcome to my mobile office. This is working in the pandemic. I had an emergency came up with my kids today, so I'm set. I'm ready to go. I got good, strong Wi-Fi going, and it's a beautiful day out here. It must be in the mid 70s and sunny, so we're all good.
Maybe the place to be in the United States with all the different humidity and heat that's been plaguing the United States during this era of climate change. But let's jump right into the cannabis conversation. First of all, I want to give you kudos. I have this philosophy and policy that I only interview authors if I've read their book. So I got your book, I read it, and I couldn't put it down. I really enjoyed it. And what's amazing to me about that book, Bruce, is it was written 5 years ago. Have we made some progress in 5 years or what?
We've made amazing progress. The funny thing is that it came out out 7, almost 8 years since I started it. And when I started the book, I mean, this was early 2013, and things were still very shaky. I mean, Colorado and Washington State had just passed adult use legalization, and we weren't even sure if that was going to be happening, if the feds were going to allow the states to roll this out and try it. Fortunately, they did. It's been a wild success, and now we're sitting here with 11 states with legal recreational cannabis, plus Washington, D.C. We're looking at possibly adding a few more this fall with the November election. And honestly, when I started writing that book, one of the reasons I wrote the book was I really didn't have a dog in the hunt. Like I was very much on the line in terms of voting for legalization. And when we passed the measure, as a writer, I was really curious to see what happens. Like, was this going to be something we were very proud of in 20 years, or was this sort of going to be an embarrassing flop? And fortunately, it's been not a flop at all. And I'm sitting here now, an editor at Leafly, and very proud to be a part of this change in history.
You brought it up, Bruce, that November and the election. Where do you stand? Again, I'll throw it out there. Your prediction on federal legalization. Interesting point brought up yesterday by Senator Markey on a show, saying if the Democrats get the House and the Senate, they'll legalize even if Biden tries to veto. Give me your prediction on federal legalization.
I think the votes are there in the House. Like that's not a question. The question is the Senate. The Senate tends to be a much older generation, and I think one of the things that we've learned over the years with cannabis issues and cannabis legalization is that there's a certain amount of split between the Democrats and the Republicans. Democrats tend to favor legalization, Republicans tend to not. But honestly, it really is one of the few actual bipartisan issues. And we've seen, there are a number of Democrats who really don't like legalization. And I think, Biden is one of them. But there are very powerful senators still in positions of power who are Democrats. Senator Dianne Feinstein of California is one that comes to mind, who has just, been even though her state has really progressed over the years, she sort of holds her nose and kind of allows as how maybe it's okay that California legalized. So I think the Senate will be a tougher sell. I actually believe that if the two houses can pass a legalization measure, that Biden will sign it. He won't like it, but I think he will sign it. I don't see the reasoning for him to veto it, other than a sort of like a personal dislike. And like, come on, that's very 1980s, 1990s. So I'm hoping he can get over that.
So
Well, I'm
generally
certainly glad.
speaking, is Trump or Biden better for cannabis starting in 2020, 2021, if you just had to pick a guy,
Yeah,
regardless of anything
I
else?
think, I think, yeah, honestly, in the year 2020, I don't think it's any question. I think Biden is much, much, much better for cannabis and for progress in the movement. I think 4 years ago, it was a legitimate question as to whether Trump or Hillary Clinton, just on the issue of cannabis, was going to be better and allow more progress to happen. Because I think Hillary Clinton was very much a part of that old line mainstream Democratic Party that tended to they found success in the 90s by being tough on crime, and that meant moving forward and pushing the notorious crime bill and these sorts of measures. And Hillary was not a big fan of legalization. Trump, on the other hand, back in 2016, as with so many issues, he was vague. He was very cagey. He said, "Yeah, I'm okay with the medical. I don't like the recreational." But as we've seen over the past 3.5 years, there have been so many instances where his administration actually took really strong steps to undermine legalization, with Jeff Sessions rescinding the Cole memo. We've seen recently this whole bizarre thing with Attorney General Barr going after like these small time. That was nuts. Anyway, just stuff like that has been going on.
I would agree, and I think the only thing, I say that exact same answer to people, and my only but in there would be, at least Hillary was a Democrat, and Bernie would have been somewhere in her cabinet, and we might have got progress. And of course, no one saw Jeff Sessions coming.
Right.
I agree 100% with what you said, except at least Bernie would have been a higher level pushing buttons, but we never got there.
Hey,
Yeah.
I gotta interrupt for a second and go back to something you said, because it definitely kind of lit a fire under me. You said that the Democrats were, using that tough on crime mantra. Haven't we now seen what tough on crime really means? Isn't that just veiled racism? Isn't that what this whole Black Lives Matter thing is all about? That the law enforcement people that were going to be tough on crime were targeting people of color because it was easy to stop them, frisk them, and, ooh, look, they're actually carrying a little joint. Let's throw them in jail for their lives.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's very clear. I think, we've seen a number of layers of the onion being peeled back, right? Like one of the most obvious layers is with the introduction of smartphones and cameras in all of our pockets, and now we actually see the police brutality that is basically practiced upon people of color, and especially specifically Black people in America. So we see that with our eyes. And I think with cannabis, one of the real points of data that we got was a few years ago with that really landmark ACLU report that came out and showed that Black people were arrested for cannabis at 4 times the rate of white people, average nationwide, even though use and consumption of cannabis was essentially the same between Black people and white people. Now, if you dive into that report, some like states and counties are ridiculous. It's like 10 times as much, 12 times as much. And I think for people like me and many others, that was just like, it's like, wow, that's really a shocking statistic that I can't be argued away. And I do think for most people who are trying to learn and understand what's going on today and are really doing a lot of reflection and thinking, yeah, the tough on crime deal in the 90s has been a disaster. The problem is, I think that for a person like Biden, he's been pretty comfortable since the 90s. His Senate seat is very comfortable. There's really no challenge there. And he really hasn't had to think about cannabis in the way that, like the three of us and many of your viewers and listeners have thought about it. And so it's going to take some time to move him along. I think there are people who are actively doing that right now. We need him to take those steps that I think many of us took over the last few years. We need him to take those steps quickly.
Absolutely. The article that you posted on June 2nd really hit home for me, Bruce, and it was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk with you. I was so moved by it. I kept reading it and saying, yeah, this guy gets it. This guy understands it. And here we are in a historic time. Did I ever think in a million years that cannabis and race relations would actually be tied together in a progressive movement? And it's happening right in front of us with an opportunity now for a new industry to actually help restore some sense of normalcy in our economy and in our lives. I mean, I can't believe I lived to see this day, let alone what might happen in a few months.
I totally agree. And one of the things that I try to do, both in person and in social media and in the things that I write right now, is I have two kids. One's 18 and one's 21, and they're very active in what's going on right now, right? And I'm the old guy, and we have a lot of great conversations about that. And we had a great one a few weeks ago where we were talking about the difference in our roles and what we could do to affect change. And I said, look, one of the greatest things, if you guys want to do it, is go out, by all means, go protest, raise a fuss in the streets. But for me, I'm in a position, like as an editor at Leafly right now, I'm one of the guys who, in a way, you're protesting against. Like, those signs are kind of meant for me. I need to change my practices and really give more thought to things like, where am I drawing my writing pool from? Who are the voices that are speaking on Leafly? Who are we speaking to? What are the assumptions that we're making? And that ripples through the entire cannabis industry. Everything from who's getting the licenses to open shops and grow facilities, to who's being employed and who's being locked out of the industry by some of the early laws where we kind of, we made things too difficult for many people who had been formerly incarcerated to come into this industry that had essentially been built on their backs. And so those are a lot of the things that I know I'm thinking about and reflecting on right now. And that is something that's happening company-wide at Leafly. I've really been kind of proud of how our company is taking this seriously.
The future of media and cannabis right now is cannabis.net and Leafly are in the similar space, and you guys have had layoffs and Weedmaps had layoffs.
Oh yeah.
Is the future going to be at some point the Leaflys, the Weedmaps, the cannabis.nets, where we can process an order and create the revenue, say from a vertical integration, whether we're shipping it or I always argue that media sites right now are the ugly stepchild, but as soon as that federal law changes, and we become Cinderella because we're the top of every sales funnel where we can get a lead for an order for 2 cents because your content ranks so well or a user can see a pop-up. Is there thoughts of that at Leafly? And of course, being part of what would be your orders, I guess, would go with Privateer to Tilray. But is there a goal at some point to just sell weed on Leafly?
That I don't know. Honestly, like I don't think there's a plan, for us to become a retailer anytime soon. We started out as being a wholly owned subsidiary of Privateer Holdings, which also spun out and created Tilray. We at this point really have no connection to Tilray, and Tilray's up in Canada, so that's like they're kind of our long lost sibling. Like, when they do well, great, but it really doesn't have much of an effect on us. So in terms of media, it's fascinating. I think right now we're in a position that is similar to so much other mainstream media, where we're all trying to figure out how to produce good journalism, accurate information, and draw a paycheck. Like, we're all trying to figure out the monetization game.
You can go up and down the screens right here. You can just point at everyone on this screen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah. And support them all. Right.
Right.
But I don't know. Here's the thing. I think that there is an unknown in terms of what may happen when federal legalization does come, what may happen in terms of the special niche that we all occupy right now. And we occupy in part because everybody else is scared to occupy it. Mainstream places are really scared. I mean, I think, a place like Politico has done a really good job of hiring smart people and letting them just cover cannabis like another beat. But we still see, I mean, the New York Times still covers it as sort of like a giggle fest. It's like, oh, it's still kind of funny what they're doing out with cannabis in California, and there's a story the other day about how edibles had sold really well. What a surprise. It's like, not a surprise to the rest of us, right?
That's right.
So I think that there still will be a place for media that handles cannabis in a serious way and doesn't just assume that everybody who consumes cannabis is a couch-locked stoner or people are dumb. I mean, that's one of the things that I have loved about this journey, that started 7-8 years ago and writing about cannabis, is the way in which it has completely undermined so many of my assumptions and eroded a lot of the sort of judgmental bone that I, had in my body.
Hey, you know what? I remember that part of the book. And if I remember correctly, it was a discussion with your spouse. I believe, is her name Claire?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and at one point she said, "You are voting for this, aren't you, Bruce?" Right?
Yeah.
There's the coach.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a really good friend, kind of neighbor down the road, who she was actually at the time a lawyer for the local ACLU, and the ACLU of Washington was one of the primary drivers of legalization in Washington State. And she really kind of put it to me, and she said, you are going to vote for this, right? I'm like, I don't know, it's not my thing, and she was one of the first to introduce me to the underlying issue, which was, and she literally said, look, this is not about you. Nobody cares whether you like marijuana or don't like marijuana. This is a social justice issue. This is a civil rights issue. This is what you need to know about how this is used to put hundreds of thousands of people of color in prison every year. And we talked about, the fact that still, I mean, even today, 600,000 people are arrested for this, which is just like, it blows my mind that is still happening. But, there are inequities even today in legal states, but there are inequities at least on such a smaller scale. We've gone from arresting 12,000 people every year in Washington State to maybe 120, something like that, so it was a big step. But yeah, you're right. That was a big conversation for me back then.
And then you went on with your whole journey as you experimented a tad, and you were, getting exposed to the culture, if you will, in Colorado as it was beginning. I actually, because of my own personal history, I admit I knew that Colorado and Washington State were at the forefront of legalization, but I really wasn't into the advocacy of it until a few years ago when I started to talk to people from my podcast who were in this fight. And I love some of the firsthand observations that you had as you went through being exposed to some of the culture in Colorado. And I'm talking about some of the parties, some of the various characters you met. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. And this was, this was one of the great joys of writing the book when I did. This was basically 2013, 2014, and 2015, was being able to just go out there and sort of swim in that Wild West atmosphere in Colorado and in Washington State. Here in Seattle, I met up with a couple of folks who were essentially driving around the city all day looking for storefronts they could lease for a retail cannabis spot. And there were so many difficult legal issues to work through there. But there were also just like there's a certain amount of just wheeling and dealing that was going on at the time. So you had that, and then you had also this amazing exuberance that was being expressed everywhere from, very serious conferences like the Drug Policy Alliance. They have a conference every 2 years that is just like an international drug reform conference, and some of the best legal minds in the world come together and gather there. And, the first event after the passage of legalization was just like an explosion of joy. It was amazing. And then on the other side, not on the other side, another part of the spectrum, you had events like the Cannabis Cup in Denver. I think it was 2014. It was the first year after the retail stores opened. And it was an extravaganza. I mean, it was like no show I've ever seen. One of my favorite anecdotes from that weekend was there was a Subway and a McDonald's right across the street from where the event was being held in Denver. And the McDonald's literally ran out of meat. Like, they had no more meat. The lines were out the door, and by like 2:00, they just put up a sign. It's like, no more meat. Sorry.
As long as they had French fries, because the French fries at McDonald's are still the best.
Yeah.
I want to go back to your article for a second and again, turn a little bit more serious. And I think it was the final paragraph where you talked about why it's on us being in the cannabis industry. And it is something that has been a common theme of both Kurt and myself. Why is the cannabis industry being held to such a high standard as far as a new industry trying to make it work in a capitalistic society? And I love how you kind of phrase this. You said the answer is simple. Cannabis has a special responsibility because cannabis has a special history. American laws constructed around this product put millions of black people in jail, denying them jobs and housing, and stripped them of their right to vote. And to pretend otherwise is to perpetuate America's 400-year crime. I'm hearing this theme a lot now. And I get chills thinking about the fact that, oh my God, this could actually be the turning point in race relations in our country, because you're hearing people, I think it was last night, NBC had a great discussion about race, and they brought in a lot of the athletes that were playing golf at Lake Tahoe, and Charles Barkley was there. And some of the conversations that they talked about, again, I've heard them before. But it does seem like it's different now. Do you get a feeling that the movement that we're seeing now, because perhaps of the 18 and 21-year-old in your house are taking part in it, is it going to be a different ending?
I have great hope that it will be a different ending. And I think it's a different ending in part because the pressure...
The time is right. The time is right.
The time is right. The pressure is so overwhelming. I think that I have a feeling like for a number of people who have been trying to advocate for this, whether it's within their own company or within their own city council or whatever situation they're in, that for a lot of people, they've had to kind of hold back a little bit because it's not making money, it's not gaining votes. It affects the bottom line. It was perceived to affect the bottom line in a negative way, and now that equation is flipped. I think if you're not working on this actively right now, it will affect your bottom line. And I hate to say that, but it's just, this is America. It's capitalism. That's the system in which we operate. And you see it in very stark and clear terms when it comes to things like, take a look at the Washington's football team right now. Right?
Exactly. Great example.
The name has been offensive for many years, many years. But when FedEx comes in and says, we're going to take our name off the stadium, things change. And that, I think in smaller ways is happening in a lot of different industries, a lot of different companies. And as you say, in cannabis, we have all known that this is a very special industry because it has a special history, and it's a special history, but we also have this amazing opportunity because we're creating this system anew, and we're creating the rules for each state as we go along. We're creating these companies, and we're creating different company cultures. And so it's so exciting. We don't have decades of sort of built-in cultural and historical systems that we have to kind of get in there and take apart. You know, we can really build from the ground up in a lot of new states. And I think that's one of the reasons that kind of keeps me at Leafly and keeps me excited about what we're doing, is because there's so often new states coming on, and they have a chance to build and do a little better than the state that came before.
Bruce, how do you get to the point where these social equity and economic empowerment candidates don't just get trampled, and they're not figureheads like we're seeing in the High Times deal that's fallen apart with Harvest Health, where the token SC or EE applicant, and it's really a company behind them, just they're putting them on the board or giving them 49 or 51%. How do we fix that?
It's a tough issue because, you know, it's a systemic issue, right? We one of the things we've learned through cannabis is that it's not just, you can't just solve these things by giving a certain number of licenses to people of color, because you can give them a person who is very competent, very smart, a license, but if they don't have access to capital, like they can't go out, you know, it's going to take $100,000, $200,000 to establish a retail storefront. So there are those issues. One of the things that I'm watching closely, and I have a lot of optimism is about are what are these? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the word now. These organizations where people come in and incubators. Sorry, blanking on the word. Incubators, where folks are coming in, entrepreneurs are coming in, and they're both helped by people who are already established, can talk with them, you know, take their talents and knowledge and smarts that are already there, and say, hey, let's talk about how to reach out to investors and what an investor wants to hear and what they don't want to hear. If you have a lot of great growing experience, that's fantastic. But there are other aspects to this. I want to partner you with this person here who can bring you along doing this. You know, it'd be like putting me in charge of an entire magazine operation, soup to nuts. Like, I can assign, I can edit, I can get the guts, the text, and the photos together. You put me in charge of ad sales, I don't know if we're going to make it, right?
Hey, you had a lot of layoffs lately, so there you go.
Look, you know, when you put a team together, you always try to put the players in the place that accentuate their strengths and hide their weaknesses. And I think that's what might be happening. But what I guess the next question is, a lot of the multi-state operators that are out there, are you finding that they have a social conscience, that they too want to give opportunities to others, those who've been most impacted on the war on drugs, for instance, and help them along? Or is it strictly a money grab at that level?
It varies, right? As in any industry. I mean, one of the most disappointing stories for me of 2020 has been the unraveling of MedMen, and to see that multi-state operator kind of just implode before our eyes, because they were in part because they were such a face of the industry in so many places. But on the other hand, I think of I've always had a lot of great conversations, and I feel a lot of good faith from an operator like Chris Crane at Forefront.
Oh, he's a nice guy. Yeah, he's a good guy.
Right, you know, and I think that there are a number of other people, people who are with the Minority Cannabis Business Association, folks there who are doing it the right way, and I think that the more we can elevate those folks and put them up as sort of best people who are putting best practices in place, the more we can spread that quality knowledge and positive way of operating. And that's, in a way, that's partly my job, is to look at who we're covering, how we're covering them, and let people know who the people are in Colorado or Massachusetts who are making positive contributions to the industry. Especially if they're people of color and they're making a go. It's like, yeah, look, check out, how are they making it? How are they making it? How can that be replicated in other states? So, and also we're looking at, at Leafly, we're looking at things like, what are the visuals we're putting up on our website? Are these all kind of soccer moms, a lot of white people in very clean situations, or do we need to have a much more diverse array of people, so that we can essentially, you can't be it until you see it, right? And so that's one of the things that I've been working on and reflecting on in the last few weeks.
I got to ask you a question about the movement towards legalizing psilocybin, and can that take away from the focus on actually moving towards federal legalization of cannabis? We've been talking a little bit about it internally, and I said, I don't want to go near it because there's so many issues related just to this plant and hemp. We haven't even talked about hemp yet. And yet we're a lot of people are focusing on psilocybin. I'm trying to gauge what kind of interest there is on that.
That's a great question. It's a question that we have been, as editors at Leafly, we have been debating ourselves. I think for the past 2 or 3 months or so. When first we had a small wave of cities passing legalization measures, and now we're looking at interesting measures, especially in the state of Oregon, coming up in November. And we have that internal conversation about, look, we have limited resources at Leafly. Where are we going to put them? Should we be covering this? If so, how? We haven't done a lot of coverage of hemp, because I think that a lot of people who are interested in hemp have other outlets. And I think so we haven't covered hemp a whole lot. I think we're actually coming down on the side of giving more coverage to psilocybin and those legalization measures, in part because for us, it's similar to cannabis in that there's so little accurate information out there. If we're going to be asking people to vote on these measures in November, we want to be a resource for them and say, hey, look, this is what an actual magic mushroom looks like. Here are the effects it has. Here's what here are the various compounds that come out of this plant, fungus.
Okay.
And that's something that we can be a real service to our readers. So that's where we're at right now. We're not turning over our website to it, but that sort of our specialty has been to really dig in and speak truth and be as accurate as possible when talking about cannabis, because there's so much misinformation out there, and we want to be the source that just says, look, this is what we know, these are what the studies say, and also here's how it affects me, here's how it affects different people, because so many outlets are afraid to do that.
Doesn't that feed the gateway drug mantra of the prohibitionists, though?
They're gonna beat the gateway drum no matter what you do. I mean, the gateway theory has been disproven 8 ways since Sunday.
Right.
So many studies have come out and said, no, if you want to talk about even the idea of a gateway drug, we're going to have to talk about alcohol. And that's where we start.
How about caffeine? Caffeine is the most addictive drug in our society. Nobody cares.
Yeah, you're looking at them right here. But yeah, seriously, I think that I'd rather give people clear information and let the people who are prohibitionists make whatever arguments they want to make and not worry about that so much.
Okay, fair
Bruce,
enough.
graphics on your site, so I have to ask you, how is it going with the new strain guide design? Because when people talk to me and say, give me a one-word answer for these websites, I'll say Weed Maps, Dispensary Finder. They say Leafly, I go, strain guide. They got there 10 years ago. They indexed it. They built it out. They're the strain guide guys. So how's the transition to the new strain guide with the, I want to say triangles, but it's probably octagons or
kind of
diamonds.
Yeah, no, it's going great. We actually we invested almost 2 years of research and design into that, because we knew both we got feedback from people, but also knew from personal experience that a simple strain name was not enough, and then saying indica sativa hybrid was not enough. And the more that we learned about terpenes and the interactions and the entourage effect and the ways that THC and CBD interacted, we wanted to find a way to really reflect those elements visually, so that you could say at a glance, oh, I see this is a heavy THC strain, or this is much more of a CBD front strain. So it's worked out really well. I mean, I'm kind of pushing our marketing department to put out more T-shirts with full color strains on them and everything.
Cool.
I kind of want to quilt with all of the various new strains and everything on them. So no, it's been working out. It's been working out really well, and I think it gives people so much more information about what they're buying. And even so, I feel like we're still in the infancy of knowing what we're buying and what effect it will have on us personally.
So I got to ask you, we brought up the subject of hemp, and in a few nights we're going to be talking to Bruce Linton, who just raised $150 million to create a fund that'll acquire other hemp companies. As you look into the future, which is going to be has the bigger upside? Is it going to be hemp and its multiple uses, or are we going to see more microbrew style of cannabis strains out there? Where do you see the biggest growth in this industry regarding other uses of the cannabis sativa plant?
I think obviously hemp has a great potential in terms of the hog farm analogy. Using everything but the squeal, right? In
Right.
terms of being able to harvest and pull value from every part of that plant. But I really think that the more that states legalize and we move toward federal legalization, and the more that people who are unfamiliar with cannabis become a little bit more familiar with it and find the products that work for them, and the sort of media, the delivery device that works for them, I think that the long-term value of cannabis as an ingested substance is going to continue to grow. I know that, in the pandemic, we've seen so many people learn so much more about and think about what they're putting into their bodies. I know, like, personally, my alcohol consumption has gone down. I don't think I've smoked a joint since March, but my edible consumption has gone up, but it's not like I'm hitting edibles hard every night. It's more like, I found a beverage that I really like, these legal beverages that have, 100 milligrams in a bottle and will last me a week or two. And then I found a gummy that I really like that, if I take half of it at night, I really nice drift off to sleep, and I sleep through the night. And so they become a regular part of my relaxation routine. And it's allowed me years ago to stop my Ambien prescription for insomnia, which I love. I hated Ambien. So I think that the more people are able to come along and engage without the fear and the stigma, the more that market will tend to slowly slowly grow. You know, I think in the early years, I thought we thought maybe there was going to be a big explosion with the soccer moms discovering cannabis. And yeah, those folks have discovered it, but everybody else is slowly discovering it too. So, and I think that's going to be good for everybody.
One more thing about your book, and I'm not sure, you'll remember this, I'm sure. The guy who had this book, The Smart Approaches to Marijuana guy, Kevin Sabat, is his name?
Kevin Sabat, yeah.
Sabat, whatever. You know what? People like that, I really don't spend a lot of time making sure I get their names right. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like, going to that conference and then actually having dinner with the guy?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, I wanted to hear from people on all sides of this issue, and I came to them in good faith, and I wanted to really like dig into their arguments, dig into their evidence, dig into their data. And I don't think that, you know, I don't think Kevin's a bad guy. I don't think he's a malignant figure or anything like that. I do, but I do think that his evidence is too loose. I think he's wrong in the arguments he's making. And as more states legalize and we get more and more data back from the early states, his arguments just are not holding up in terms of the great fears that people had initially about legalization. You know, so Kevin's got the group, I think Smart something Approaches. About marijuana, yes. Sam, right?
Yep.
And then the other fellow who's out there right now is Alex Berenson, who had this book come out a couple of years ago, and he's become a big Fox News commentator. He's kind of a coronavirus truther now. Like weirdly, I don't know what he's doing, but his big argument was that there was a sort of secret, massive outbreak of psychosis among people, mostly young people, because of cannabis legalization. And like the data is just not there. It simply is not there. But he finds a ready audience in folks like Fox News and others who want to hear a scare story. And one of the things we've learned is that when things go well and problems don't occur, that's not so sexy in terms of, you know, the cable talk shows and that sort of thing. So it's much easier to get on and say the sky is falling, people are running around stark raving mad, than to go on and say, you know, actually it's been kind of quiet, like things are going well.
Well, they're not going well right now, let's just say. And I don't think I'm too jaded on that on so many fronts. And I'm certainly hoping everybody in your world is safe and healthy and sane, because I think it has this whole experience has tried all of our patients, especially parents of young children. I don't know how they're doing it. Kurt, I don't know how you do it.
It's always a challenge, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to Bruce when this kind of COVID change maybe dissipates, and hopefully we have some changes in the BLM front, and it'll be great to have you back on when that happens to kind of look back from this show, what changed in our predictions too. So hopefully you can come back on the show in the future.
Absolutely. Love it. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you guys. Thank you for having me.
You bet, Bruce. And before we go, I know that you're a sports fan, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, there was a part of my life, like 30 years of it, where that's all I did. That's all I cared about. That's all I talked about. I'm pretty sure at some point I heard you doubt that we will see a 60-game Major League Baseball season. Are you leaning in that direction still at this point?
Man. I wish, you know, look, 60 games is still 60 games of agony for a Seattle Mariners fan, right? But I love baseball.
Watching though, look on the bright side.
There you go. I love baseball, but man, there's a lot of moving parts. There are 26 players on a Major League Baseball roster. That's probably expanded now, and it's a lot of guys to kind of keep contained. You know, I mean, I have greater hopes that the NBA season can finish out and the hockey season, right? Baseball, boy, I don't know. I mean, it's good luck. I'm wishing them well, but I don't know that I would place money in Vegas on finishing out the whole baseball season.
And then I want to even talk about the NFL, and also keep in mind 2 players in the NBA bubble have already snuck out. So, it's human nature. Yeah, it's human nature. This is what's going to happen. I have no idea if we're even going to get to opening day, let alone a championship, of World Series, a Stanley Cup, an NBA championship. And I'm not very confident about the NFL at all. But
oh man, think about if you played on sports teams, right? Every team, there's a lot of really great people, but every team has a couple of wingnuts, right? I mean.
Yes, indeed. We're all human, okay? We have a wingnut factor in our makeup, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, Bruce, thank you so much for joining Kurt and myself here on Weed Talk Now. And again, don't be a stranger. You've got a place to stay in Massachusetts with 2 guys that we know our way around the Bay State pretty well. So you're welcome here any old time.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you. Let's do it again sometime.
You bet. And that'll do it for Weed Talk Now. So for Bruce Barcott and Kurt Dalton, I'm Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media, supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.